But my gosh, Scott, we have the best thing that anything could ever be formed around, and that is the creator of the universe. That is the Son of God that sacrificed for us. How that is not just this monstrous central pillar that we all can just gather around and find actual community, not just connect about, but
Yeah.
find actual community.
Welcome back to the Rheology Podcast. Rheology is a nonprofit ministry that is centered around rethinking, researching, and rediscovery, a process that dives deep into the depths of an intimate partnership with God through a concept Jesus initiated called ecclesia. We strive to cultivate an environment that is not only safe to question and seek, but also one that is founded on the truths of partnership, words of hope that were uttered from the lips of Jesus himself. So in this podcast, we'll question Christian tradition, we'll investigate God myths, and we'll listen to those who are stirring, questioning, and desperately seeking more of what God is doing in and around us each day.
Hey, everybody, this is Scott Johnson with the Rheology Podcast. We're glad to have you today. That guy over there, that's Darren Martin. Hey, Darren Martin, how's it going, buddy?
Good morning. Doing
Good
good.
morning. Good. Glad to have you on the podcast today. Darren and I are going to talk about some stuff today that is dealing with Christianity and our 21st century American culture. And before we get to that, though, hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, we would really encourage you to give a thumbs up to the video. We'd love for you to subscribe. And if you're listening to this via the podcast, via wherever you find podcasts, you can do the same thing as well. And if this strikes a chord with you, we'd love to hear from you. You can comment in the comment section of the YouTube channel. You can reach out to us through the website, which is rheologylife.com. So we're glad to have you. So getting today, the title of our little conversation is called, Why is it so hard to find community in church? And so before we do that, I wanted to share a statistic that I came across the other day. And I thought this was super interesting, maybe even super depressing. I don't know. It could be. But this is from the American Psychiatric Association. And it says this. It says the latest Healthy Minds monthly poll from the American Psychiatric Association finds that early in 2024, 30% of adults say that they have experienced feelings of loneliness at least once a week over the past year, while 10%, a third of that, say that they are lonely every day. To put that into perspective, there's roughly 340 million people in the United States. That means 102 million, give or take a few, 1 out of every 3 people experience loneliness at least once a week, and 10.2 or more million experience loneliness every single day. So, before we kind of get going down this rabbit hole, let's just state the obvious is that from a Christian point of view, God did not create humanity for it to live on its own, to be out there on its own, and to live life without anybody else. So it's very obvious. We get that in the Genesis story of both Adam and Eve. And if anything, what that tells us is that, creation is better when humanity is together. And so there's a couple of scriptures that a lot of people know very well, very famously, like Matthew 18:20, which talks about where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I'll be there with you. That's the idea of not just one, even though I have no doubt God's with, one solo person. That's not what that's saying. First Corinthians 12, Paul is telling these Christians in Corinth, it's like, hey, listen, here's the deal. There is a new body that's been formed, and it's the body of all these people who are now in partnership with Jesus. And we're all a part of that. We're all different types of part of the body. So there again, many, many parts coming together. And then Hebrews 10 which is one that gets quoted back to me a lot, which is this idea of don't forsaking the assembly, or just the idea of like, keep on meeting together, where we're being encouraged, and the early Christians were being encouraged to like continue to hang out, get together, be together. And this kind of points us to the direction we're taking today with this idea of community. And so, Darren, I don't know about you, but for me, on my Facebook feed, I have a lot of Christian friends. And so I see a lot of like interesting posts. I'll say it that way. Interesting posts. A few months ago, I saw an interesting post that someone had shared. And interestingly enough, these posts do not have any kind of like sourcing, right? They're just something someone's put together, and now we take it as official word. And so therefore we go share it all over everywhere. But this post basically was talking about the only way to try to find true community was in your local church. Now, you and I both have been a part of full-time ministry. And I don't know about you, but my experience is that I have only found church community, and I'm not sure how true it was, while I was involved in youth ministry or in full-time ministry. But once that was done, that community aspect with those very same people became harder and harder to nurture or even to like keep together. And so there's an excerpt from a book called So You Don't Want to Go to Church Anymore. It's by a guy named Wayne Jacobson. Really cool book. You should read it if you haven't read it. It's like a fictional story based on facts. But anyway, this is a quote. It's one of my favorites. And Darren, you and I have talked about this so many different times. But the quote says this: institutionalism breeds task-based friendships. As long as you're on the same task together, you can be friends. But when you're not, well, people tend to treat you like damaged goods. And honestly, that has been my experience with church way more than true or natural community. So what's your take off on that?
All right, so here's my disclaimer. As you've said about yourself and what you're doing here, I will say about myself, I'm not an expert. You know who else wasn't an expert in what they did? The disciples.
Yeah.
But they
Peter.
became experts because they hung out with Jesus. So am I an expert on culture and anthropology and other big words? See, I don't even know the words. That's how not expert I am. No, but I have eyes, and I like to research, and I like to learn. I like to dive deep into things, and I like to hear what experts are saying, and I like to draw connections between points that other people may not necessarily be drawing. And so as I have, as you and I have talked about this at length over the years, and I continue to dive into it. I mean, I have pages of observations that I've written down and thoughts that I've written down and researched and find out what the experts are saying about it. So the question of why or can we find community in church? Is church the only place to find true, genuine community? Well, the obvious answer is no. And I'll give you two reasons, two high level reasons. Number one, we are facing a definition crisis for this concept of community as a culture. Mm-hmm. And nobody's immune to it. The church is not immune to this. And so, so big level number one is we have a cultural problem with what community means, what it looks like, how do we know when we've got it, so forth, so on. The second problem is because the church is also not immune from that. It tries to address it through programs, and instead of actually doing the things. Let me back up. Instead of actually doing the work to understand what community really is and what it takes to have it, they institute programs with the name community in them. So that way, if somebody goes to or participates in this community program, they're now in community with other people. But as you've said, a lot of it is task-based. A lot of it is short-term, based things. And so nobody knows what community really is. I mean, my gosh, Scott, think about this. If we were to pull 100 random pastors and say, define community, do you think they could answer that? Everybody kind of knows. It's like, well, people are together.
Right.
And of course, we got to throw in the word fellowship. Well, they're going to fellowship, these types of things. What would they say?
Yeah.
Could they define it?
Yeah. The funny thing is, like you said there, I just wrote this in our notes here, and I've talked about this word before in earlier podcast episode a year ago, I think. It's the Greek word koinonia. And we do define koinonia as exactly what you just said, fellowship, community. But the reality is like koinonia has its roots more in intercourse than it has in fellowship, right? And it's like, that alone right there, right off the bat, hints at something way more intimate than just hanging out with other people and hoping that somehow, it becomes intimate. And I feel like that's the institutional version that we typically get, right, through small groups and community groups, is like, we're going to put some people together and we hope that they become best buddies and they spill their guts and
it never happens.
Iron sharpens iron, and it just never happens.
It's the exception that it happens, not the rule.
Yeah. It doesn't. It's not that it never happens, but the effectiveness rate on that wouldn't fly in any business. No business would keep doing that because the success rate is so bloody low. So,
and that just substantiates the fact that church leaders don't know what community is, because all they're doing is regurgitating the efforts that have been really attempted for the last 4 or 5 decades,
easily, and
hoping that magically it just works out. And so that's really where this problem starts. I mean, especially for the church, when we go back in time, what was community? Literally, community was the people around you, right? They lived geographically where you lived. Whether you liked them or whether you didn't like them, whether you had conflict or whether you were friends, that was your community. And in that community, generally speaking, there was interdependence upon each other for everybody's ongoing, sustaining of life. Okay, so we have proximity, we have interdependence upon each other. And through those things, you had a shared life.
Yeah.
Life was that way because it had to be that way. You couldn't call your best friend, over 2,000 miles away. And who you can, nowadays, you can talk to anybody in the world anytime you want. Yeah. Back then, you had the people around you. And what came out of that, well, go even further back, right? As you had said, starting out, we were created to be with people. That's why, I mean, going back to, tribalism, right? Going back, I mean, my gosh, since the beginning, people have always found the need to be in groups of people, right?
Yeah.
It's a survival.
Yeah.
It's a survival instinct. Find a group or die alone,
Yeah.
kind of a thing.
Yeah. We always think of like patriarch and matriarch societies. The Bible is nothing but that. The Old Testament, First Testament, whatever you call it. I mean, it's nothing but that. You think of Abraham and Sarah going into Egypt. We typically think it was just the two of them going into Egypt.
Right.
And he had a massive caravan of like,
You-
not
His
necessarily
whole
family, but it was family.
and extended
Yeah,
family,
yeah,
and yeah,
exactly, exactly. So yes, we're talking about a culture that's very different from. I mean, I think of like our culture, dude, like how different it is. So like even from, excuse me, like let's say our culture from our parents' culture. Where did your parents grow up? Where'd your mom and dad grow up?
Mom grew up in Texas. Dad grew up in Iowa.
Okay. How long was your dad in Iowa?
Up through college, and then he moved out to California, which is where he met my mom.
Okay. Before that, your grandparents, where were they? Do you know where they were born and where they settled?
Uh, well, they settled in Texas and Iowa. Um, no, but, beyond that, I don't really know. I'm sure I knew at some point.
Yeah, my biological dad's family were from Indiana for a couple generations. Before that, I actually came from the Carolinas. But my mom's family were Indiana for a long, long time. And I used to like, think of my mom's family and just use her family because I'm closer to their family. Like all of them live in Indiana. Like my mom's, like all of her siblings are still in Indiana. All of like, the family tree going up, they were all primarily in Indiana. And you had a culture where like you went to high school and you probably went to your state college if you went to college. If you didn't, you just stayed. Like how many people stay in their hometowns nowadays? Right. And it's like me and you, I haven't been in Indiana in years. I haven't lived in Indiana since since Brandon was in the youth ministry, which was a long time ago. We won't talk about that, how long ago. But it's just like our culture is like so it's such a hodgepodge of like there is no matriarch, patriarch kind of. There's no semblance of it whatsoever, really. If you think about it.
Right.
I mean, look at me, man. My kids are out of the house. Where do both my kids live? One of my kids lives outside of Hilton Head, which is 3.5 hours away. My other one lives in Savannah, Georgia, 4 hours away. They don't even live with me. So it's like just that idea of like a biblical community versus ours now. It's definitely, I think it's almost like a pipe dream, and maybe that's the pipe dream that we're trying to, facilitate and institutionalize. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, right. Well, yeah, I mean, yes, among other things that, so to bring it forward, so I don't get so lost in the history of everything. So to bring it forward, right? This is the, how I described it, the proximity, the shared life, the interdependence. That's the idea of community, and it has been for the longest time, and it's still in our minds. That's what we want. We know
Right.
that we need this.
That's what it's supposed to look like anyway.
What it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
But what does it look like today? Right.
Yeah.
It is so different because of the onset of the digital age and all of the wonderful, fantastic technologies that we have.
Stuff we're doing right now.
Is right. That's absolutely right. We are able to curate our own groups.
Yep.
You can live in a place, never know your neighbors, not be independent or interdependent on anybody that's around you. You can have everything delivered to you. You can have a community in China. You can have a community up in Canada. You can have a community down in South Africa. And these are all the communities that you curate based on interests.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we replace this idea of so let me introduce what we do have today in place of community, I believe, and that's just connection. We are replacing the truth and the execution of community with connection.
Yeah.
And connection is not the same as community. Connection is it's moments of interaction, right? There's no I don't need anybody from this group to do anything for me, and they don't need me to do anything from them.
Yeah.
We're not tied together.
Yeah.
As we're community, there's mutual investment. So,
and seemingly short-lived too. Every bit of the connection is by design is short-lived.
Yeah, because as soon as there's friction, guess what? You go find another community.
Or if the task is gone,
or if the task is gone, right?
Because I mean, a lot of times we do make these connections, and they're not probably long-term connections. They're just short. I mean, they're fine, and it's fine, but they're not. It's not an interdependent deal really at all.
Right, not at all. There's no accountability in connection. Now, if you're in community with people, by the nature of being in community, there's accountability. But when you're in connection, there's no accountability there. So we have replaced community with connection. The church is no different. The church. So and Scott, you're aware of this, recent development for me. So there's a lovely group of people on the north side of Charlotte, about 45, 50 minutes away. We share a common identity, common values, and all these kinds of things. And as that group was forming, and trying to figure out who they are, I had to say, look, love you guys, and I love what you're doing, but I live 50 minutes away. And this can't be community for me because I'm not a part, I can't be a part of the daily stuff that you guys might be able to generate together. I'm always going to be an outsider because I live so far away, which is another problem with churches. People are coming from, 30 to 60 to sometimes more, minutes away to go attend a service. Well, how do you form interdependence and a shared life when that's where everybody's coming from? Well, you can't, right? And that's why they form community groups and all this kind of stuff. But so here we go. Summary of the cultural problem. Okay. The cultural problem is that we want community, but we are drowning. I'll put it this way. Let me put it this way. Here's the cultural problem. We are drowning in connections, but starving for community.
Yeah.
We're drowning in these momentary interactions and desperately wanting a shared life, which, so I'll ask you, Scott, beyond the survival, what do we benefit? What's our benefit? Why do we crave community so much? What do we get out of it? What do you think?
Well, I'll speak for me. I do look at a biblical patriarchy, family, and I do long for that. We both live in the Charlotte metro area, and you and I have both said, our families are not here. Well, your family is not here. Well, that's not true either. Part of your family is here, right? But you have another part of your family in Texas.
Mhm.
And for me, I lived for so many years without any family in Charlotte. And then my nephew moved here. And the next thing you know, my niece moved here. Next thing you know, my brother and sister-in-law they're here now. And like, I love that because, for me, my desire is to be involved in a community, if we'll say that as a generic term, or a group or whatever, that everyone has the same desires to sharpen one another, right? That whole
Mhm.
idea of sharpening one another. That I'm not just the one that's putting it together and pulling teeth to try to get people to be a part of that community. That everybody has the same desires and everybody works towards it. And so for me, it's like finding a purpose together. And if we talk about the ecclesia and that first connection partnership with God through the ecclesia, that's number one. But the byproduct is like other people are a part of that partnership as well. And I think that's what we see in the New Testament is this idea that there's a new patriarch, right? And God is the patriarch of this new family, and we all have a place and a part to play. And that to me, like that's what I long for is like a part to play and everybody else to have a part to play. And all our parts are different. And it's a beautiful thing. And a desire for, you know, everybody to have the same desire to like want to pursue it.
Yeah.
The question is like, so that's like my default generic answer for, you know, the the generic idea of community. That's what I look for as far as a patriarch, real family mentality. That's what I'm looking for. There are different levels of interactions with humanity that do not equal, as we've said before, intimacy is only really realistic, something that you actually will experience with like maybe one or two or maybe three other people in your whole lifetime. I mean, like true intimacy. But so that's like the high side. The low side would be, just going to like a Charlotte Hornets game. You and I have season tickets, and we get to know the people around us, and that's another level of like, social, interaction, right?
Right.
But I mean, I don't call these people up on the weekends, or I don't text them and, hey man, how's it going? Or maybe once in a while I'll text one of them or something like that. We don't really have a life outside of that.
Yeah.
So I think the expectation is like, unfortunately for the church, the expectation is always the high side. And for me, I'm guessing that would be, again, I know what it is for me, for like real community, if we want to say it that way, or partnership or whatever. That's what it looks like to me. That's what I'm looking for. And I would guess that people are somewhat kind of somewhere around there, maybe. I don't know.
I would say, yeah. So let me sum up your answers. In my opinion, great answers. And then we can take everything that we've discussed and we can move this into the church realm, right? This is all of the context that we needed to have out on the table to give us language and understanding for tackling this within the church setting. So basically what you said is, there's social and emotional and spiritual support. So that's that shared activity where through conversation, through activity, we engage and we receive that. You talked about growth, right? How do you grow when there's nobody holding up a mirror to you?
Yeah.
You've got to have somebody else there saying, "Hey, man, this isn't working," and to be able to iron sharpens iron, like you said.
Yeah.
which can only happen if there's true belonging, there's true
Yeah.
intimacy. And I say it this way. I want to be known, and people like me anyway.
Right. Right.
That for me is the highest goal, because
Yeah.
I know my shortcomings. I know how I irritate people. I know how I can be, because of the amount of work that it takes for me to withhold that part of my being and nature. I want to be known,
Yeah.
and people still like me,
Yeah.
regardless of what they know about me. And that is what you get from community. And you cannot get that through connection.
No. Let me say this too, because we've talked about this as well. And I think to piggyback on that, that's like the main feeling, right? Like your main initial feeling is like, just want to be known, like number one. And then the asterisk is like, and people still like me.
Still like me, please.
Right. Still want to hang out. We talked about how like the story of Robin having a coworker saying, I'm just kind of struggling in this job, I'm looking for another job. And during the weekend, Robin found a couple jobs and came back on Monday and went to her and said, hey, I found a couple jobs you might be interested in. And this coworker was like, I can't believe you remembered I said that. And Robin's like, well, of course I remembered. You told me. She goes, yeah, I just can't. I mean, it's like crazy that you actually thought of me. And like, for me, I feel like that is like probably it's a selfish thing, kind of. But like, if I'm being real, like it would be nice if people actually thought of me every once in a while, like that whole idea of being together is like, the knowing, right? The knowing, not just knowing your name, but like really like getting to know you, and all of that encompasses that is the idea of that someone else is actually taking the time out of their lives to think about you, and that's that reciprocal kind of deal there that I feel like is like a common, has to be a common ground,
Right.
of this.
Right. Right. For me, and you and I love war movies. We love any demonstration of the brotherhood, right? That is formed. So for me, this right here is the ultimate example of community. I mean, it is literally proximity, shared life, and interdependence.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if you like the guy or don't like the guy. When it comes down to it, you are on each other's side.
Yep.
In the end.
Yeah.
And it would be really cool if we could reproduce that with a shared faith. I mean, for the Marine Corps, it's about freedom. It's about, these ideals. But my gosh, Scott, we have the best thing that anything could ever be formed around, and that is the creator of the universe. That is the Son of God that sacrificed for us. How that is not just this monstrous central pillar that we all can just gather around and find actual community in, not just connect about, but find actual community in.
Well, due to the length of the talk that I had with my friend Darren, we decided to split this episode into 2 parts. So you just watched part 1, and we hope that you'll stay tuned, that when we release part 2 in just a few weeks, you can finish the conversation about, can we find real, true community in church? Thanks for watching. See you next time.
From the whole Rheology team, we hope these podcasts are encouraging and educational. Rheology exists for 3 main reasons: to reach, train, and equip those who want to go deeper with God in this partnership called Ecclesia. If God has been stirring in your heart, where you are wondering if there's more than what you've been experiencing in today's 21st century Christianity, we'd love to connect with you, to hear your story and help you know that you are not alone. You can simply contact us via the website, rheologylife.com, or reach out via Instagram at rheology_life. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.